He's just got so much information and loves to study and research, and it's just so fun. Metaphysical teacher, here it is, light worker, art history instructor, and passionate world traveler, 14 years residence in Europe, changed his life forever. Major influences were Alan Watts, Rudolf Steiner. He trained in his alternative education system in the Waldorf schools. Osho, he became a disciple, and diploma in astrological counseling from a school in Switzerland. Initiation as a priest of Wicca. Initiation in the use of the sacred Native American pipe, and 4 years residence in Sedona. Ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru, and certificates in membership and hands-on healing from Harmony Grove Spiritualist Association in Escondido, California. And most recently, Hawaiian shamanism. Douglas is working today with Tarot.
No.
And I don't know that word, I can never read it. No. But he's going to be at First Spiritualist doing a fair. Douglas won't be with us today at Tarot, but he usually does. And he's wonderful as a special deck that he uses. And I've just known Douglas when I have my weekends up at Harmony Grove as minister of the weekend, and I'd have so always see if Douglas could work with me as a healer and a message giver. He's just has so much wisdom, and so I want to welcome warmly, please, Douglas Barker.
So, good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
Everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Good. I'm going to start out by asking, how many of you are curious about people who are extraterrestrial? Maybe you've met some. They might not even have known it themselves. My talk today is entitled Characteristics of Extraterrestrial Folk, and Are You Perhaps One Yourself? Now, these are people that we often term starseeds. You've probably heard the expression before. What starseeds are advanced souls who are living in human form on Earth, but they have their origins in other planets, galaxies, universes, or dimensional frequencies. What happened was a call for help was sent out to the universe to help Earth conquer the negative forces that have been in control here for so long, and to help humanity transition from the third dimension all the way to the fifth. Now, if you're a starseed, you said yes to the call, and you came here as a galactic volunteer. However, most starseeds are unaware of their unique gifts, and they may not even be aware that they're not human souls. Like any other soul who incarnates into the third dimensional reality of planet Earth, they first have to go through the veil of amnesia. As the Greeks would put it, they would cross the Acheron River. And then they forget their spiritual and their extraterrestrial origins. Now, that doesn't mean that they have not been incarnated on this planet before either. The majority of starseeds are old souls, and they've incarnated a number of times on Earth in order to prepare themselves and other souls on Earth for ascension. But they won't remember their grand mission until they've had their awakening. And the awakening may be either sudden or gradual, but it involves a temporary dark night of the soul quite often, a period of depression, maybe even chaos, before, in a sense, they rise from the ashes and awaken. Now, most of the starseeds on Earth are from the Pleiades, Orion, Sirius, Arcturus, Lyra, and the Andromeda Galaxy. Their total number has been given by some sources, if it's correct, as about 200 million, which means roughly about one person out of every 40 on the planet. With Pleiadians being the largest group, they would number about 75 million. Now, there are thought to be three different groups of starseeds, based on the number of incarnations that they've had on Earth primarily. First off, you have old soul starseeds. They've had many incarnations going as far back as Atlantis. Then you have ordinary starseeds, who are the majority of those who are incarnate at present, and they began incarnating on Earth in post-Atlantean times. And then there's new soul starseeds, which would include such people as indigo, crystal, and rainbow children, who are often in their first incarnation on the planet. As a result, they find life here to be fairly shocking and difficult. Crystals especially may consequently have a hard time making their way in life because they're so sensitive. And rainbow children may be somewhat late in learning how to speak, and the result is that they're sometimes misdiagnosed as autistic. And although starseeds come from a number of different worlds, which differ from each other, in general, they have many traits in common, and that's what I'm going to go into now. So think of yourself, or for people you know who might strongly fit this kind of pattern. They're often tall and slender and have a kind of Nordic or Scandinavian look. Their faces and necks tend to be long and narrow, although there are exceptions to this, of course. The skull may be somewhat elongated in order to hold a larger brain. They have high immunity, and they recover quickly from illnesses. They may appear younger than their chronological age, and they often have greater longevity than other human beings, partly because they tend to live healthier lifestyles. Their eyes are full of wisdom and are often large, round, even unusual looking, with a lighter color. Sometimes the irises appear like they're textured. Their hair often shows a reddish tint in sunlight. They have a tendency to bruise easily without knowing the cause. They may also have unusually shaped birthmarks. They can suffer from chronic sinusitis. They're highly sensitive and easily feel overwhelmed and drained, especially Pleiadians, when they're in places that have loads of people and intense stimuli, such as malls, loud parties, clubs, or networking events. They're quite sensitive to frightening and or violent films and video games, and tend to make a point of avoiding them. They may also be very sensitive to stimulants, and their sensitivity may make them prone to substance abuse. They've always felt as if they don't belong. They find it difficult to fit into groups of people and often feel lonely at school or at work. They have little in common with the majority of people and don't really understand their tastes or their motivations. Usually they have only a few very close friends with whom they can relate deeply and can be very choosy about whom they spend their time with. They may be socially somewhat awkward and more observers than participants. They dislike gossip, and they're bored stiff by small talk. They're often reluctant to involve themselves in human institutions because they find them incomprehensible. And they also take pains to avoid karmic debts that could result because they don't want to have to come back again necessarily. They tend to be more task-oriented than relationship-oriented. On their home planets, the typical Earth type of relationship, romantic, sexual, and intended to result in a contractual marriage and pregnancy and last for life, on some of their home planets, those conditions don't really exist. So consequently, sometimes they don't marry, or if they do, it's often later in life. They may not really need another half in order to feel complete. And in some cases, there may not be any gender distinction on their home planet. Has anyone in here ever seen the film Cocoon, which was an award-winning film that came out in 1985? And I remember when I lived in Sedona, a girlfriend I had there had me watch it with her because she said it might waken some memories in you. They might well remain childless or else have just one. And it's quite common for that one to be born through C-section. They find much of society hostile, and they cannot understand such things as environmental damage, poverty, the debt-based economy, greedy politicians, fear-based media, punitive divorce laws, etc., etc. And often they are not people who make a big splash in society. More often not. They tend to work humbly behind the scenes rather than call attention to themselves. Although they're always ready to help, they often don't make the usual close connections with people, and therefore sometimes people misjudge them as being cold or distant or aloof. They're usually going through some kind of a spiritual awakening, or they have already gone through one. They're into holistic health and don't trust the pharmaceutical industry. They're peace-loving and they cannot understand war or wanting to join the military. They're highly intuitive and good at reading between the lines. They see behind lies and people's masks. Often they have a fascination with flying, hang gliding, piloting a plane, skydiving, or they may just go flying a lot in their dreams. Sometimes they're fascinated by technology and gadgets, especially Syrians. They tend to believe in conspiracy theories. They're wise old souls, often more mature than their contemporaries in some ways, and they have cultivated friendships with older people ever since childhood. They may well have stood out when they were children and may have been bullied because of it. They usually ask deep and serious questions, and they want to know why things are the way they are. They're fascinated by things like astronomy, astrology, looking at the stars, or reading science fiction. They have often had a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. They feel like they have a big mission in life, but they often don't know what it is. It might be felt very simply as a kind of general urge to help the planet and humanity in some fashion. But they also may be constantly searching for their life purpose and have tried various metaphysical ways in order to find it. They usually have psychic, mediumistic, or paranormal abilities of some kind. They love nature. They try to be in it as often as possible, go on walks through forests and things like that. They're drawn to whole foods and a vegetarian diet. And they're usually very spiritual rather than religious. They may have unexplainable memories in which something or other just doesn't add up. They love animals, and animals love them. Sometimes they feel homesick, even though they are at home, and they're longing for a true home in the stars. They have dreams about aliens and spaceships and believe in extraterrestrials, and that most of them are positive. Often they're attracted to reading about starseeds. They may have memories of living on another world. They may have seen UFOs or even had a close encounter with one. They're empathic and they easily pick up on other people's emotions. Sometimes they're disappointed by their physical bodies because they find them dense, heavy, and fragile, because on their home planets they tended to operate in higher dimensions. They love reading, especially spiritual books. They're much better at problem solving than most people, especially if they're Lyrans. They may have a lower body temperature or lower blood pressure than most people. They may also be very sensitive to extremes of temperature, cold or humid heat. They sometimes feel as if their biological parents are not their real parents and that they have another family in the stars. When they were children, they had imaginary friends, quote unquote. They're sensitive to electronics. Sometimes appliances break around them or lights will flicker or things like that. They believe in reincarnation as well as karma, and they feel they've lived many lives. Deja vu experiences are common. Although deja vu experiences are often not a glimpse from something you've experienced in another life, but simply you've glimpsed something of the script you wrote before you came into this incarnation. They are dreamers. They daydream a lot. They have big dreams for the future. They may have lucid dreams in which they become conscious that they're having a dream at night. They have a tendency to see repeating numbers like 1111. They're attracted to water because often their home planets consisted primarily of water. They tend to be lone wolves by nature, and they can spend long stretches of time alone, and they may even require that. This is especially true for Lyrans and Andromedans. They're highly creative and they're full of ideas for projects, art, business, etc. They enjoy being either nude or barefoot and wearing clothing that's non-restrictive. Often they seek anonymity and dress quite plainly. Females may wear very little makeup. They're drawn to crystals. They love to travel more than the average person, and they value freedom highly, especially Andromedans. They have a fascination for ancient civilizations, Atlantis, Egypt, Tibet, etc. And most of them would like to meet extraterrestrials. Now, those are the characteristics, and how many of you thought that you can identify with this, or you know people who would fit very much into that category? Yeah, number
Pretty
of
much
them,
all,
right.
not everything.
Yeah, my own acquaintance with that, I met a Japanese fellow while I was in Sedona, and he called himself Ark because he said he was originally from Arcturus. And I said, yeah, I felt a connection with Arcturus sometimes myself, and he looked at me and he said, no, you're Pleiadian. And with that, I would say, I thank you for your very kind attention.